Introduction. Protectionist Armor. The United States, a self-proclaimed champion of free trade, finds itself entangled in a web of contradictions. President Biden's recent tariffs on Chinese technology expose a deep-seated hypocrisy at the heart of American trade policy. These tariffs, levied on goods ranging from semiconductors to solar panels, represent a stark departure from the principles of open markets that the U.S. has long espoused. This protectionist stance, while superficially aimed at protecting American jobs and industries, carries significant economic and geopolitical ramifications. The Biden administration argues that these tariffs are necessary to counter unfair trade practices by China and to safeguard national security. However, critics argue that these measures will ultimately harm American consumers and businesses, who will face higher prices and reduced choices. Moreover, these tariffs risk escalating tensions with China and undermining global trade rules. This protectionist turn signals a shift in American economic policy, one that prioritizes domestic interests over global cooperation. The Free Trade Gospel, a Selective Sermon. The United States has long presented itself as a staunch advocate for free trade, urging other nations to dismantle trade barriers and embrace open markets. This message is often delivered with a missionary zeal, emphasizing the purported benefits of free trade for all participants. The theory, espoused by economists and policymakers alike, posits that free trade leads to greater efficiency, lower prices, and increased consumer choice. However, this free trade gospel often rings hollow, especially when viewed against the backdrop of U.S. trade practices. The U.S. has a long history of employing protectionist measures, selectively shielding its own industries from foreign competition while demanding open markets from others. This double standard has fueled accusations of hypocrisy and undermined the credibility of U.S. leadership on trade. The U.S. frequently justifies its protectionist deviations from the free trade gospel by invoking national security concerns, unfair trade practices by other countries, or the need to protect domestic jobs. These justifications, while sometimes legitimate, are often used to mask protectionist impulses aimed at benefiting specific industries or political constituencies. The selective application of free trade principles, based on political expediency rather than consistent economic logic, exposes the inherent contradictions in U.S. trade policy. Echoes of the past, Smoot-Hawley and Beyond. The recent tariffs on Chinese technology are not an isolated incident. Throughout its history, the United States has repeatedly resorted to protectionist measures, often with disastrous consequences. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, widely regarded as a colossal economic blunder, stands as a stark reminder of the dangers of protectionism. This act, which raised tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods, triggered a global trade war and exacerbated the Great Depression. The Smoot-Hawley tariffs, enacted in a misguided attempt to protect American jobs and industries, backfired spectacularly. They triggered retaliatory tariffs from other countries, leading to a sharp decline in global trade. This in turn deepened the economic crisis, throwing millions into unemployment and prolonging the Depression's grip on the world economy. Despite the painful lessons of Smoot-Hawley, the U.S. continues to flirt with protectionism, often succumbing to the allure of short-term political gains. From steel tariffs to agricultural subsidies, the U.S. government has often intervened in the market, shielding its own industries from competition while advocating for open markets elsewhere. These actions, while benefiting select domestic industries, often harm consumers and undermine the overall economy. They also erode the credibility of the U.S. as a champion of free trade, exposing the gap between rhetoric and reality. The China Syndrome, a tech Cold War. The Biden administration's tariffs on Chinese technology mark a significant escalation in the ongoing trade war between the world's two largest economies. This trade war, initiated by the Trump administration, has extended beyond traditional goods like steel and soybeans to encompass the cutting-edge technologies that will define the 21st century. The focus on technology reflects a growing strategic rivalry between the U.S. and China, a competition for global economic and technological dominance. The U.S. government argues that these tariffs are necessary to counter China's unfair trade practices, including intellectual property theft and forced technology transfer. They also cite national security concerns, arguing that China's growing technological prowess poses a threat to U.S. interests. These arguments, while not without merit, are often used to justify protectionist measures that benefit specific U.S. industries. The tariffs on Chinese technology represent a dangerous escalation in the trade war, one that could have far-reaching consequences for the global economy. They risk fragmenting global supply chains, stifling innovation, and ultimately harming businesses and consumers on both sides of the Pacific. This tech-focused trade war also signals a broader decoupling between the U.S. and China, a move away from the interconnected global economy that has characterized recent decades. This decoupling, driven by strategic rivalry and protectionist impulses, threatens to usher in an era of economic fragmentation and heightened geopolitical tensions. Section 5. Winners and Losers, the Tariff Tango. Tariffs, despite their allure as a tool to protect domestic industries, often create more losers than winners. While tariffs may provide temporary relief to specific industries facing foreign competition, they ultimately distort markets and harm the overall economy. The costs of tariffs are borne by consumers, who face higher prices for imported goods, and by businesses that rely on imported inputs for their production processes. The recent tariffs on Chinese technology illustrate this dynamic. While they may benefit some U.S. tech companies by shielding them from Chinese competition, they will likely harm other businesses that rely on Chinese components. Consumers, too, will face higher prices for electronics and other technology products. The net effect of these tariffs is a reduction in consumer welfare and a drag on economic growth. The imposition of tariffs creates a complex web of winners and losers, often with unintended consequences. While tariffs may provide a temporary boost to protected industries, they can also lead to job losses in other sectors, as businesses struggle to cope with higher input costs and reduced demand. The overall economic impact of tariffs is typically negative, as they distort markets, reduce efficiency, and harm consumers. The short-term political gains from protecting certain industries often come at the expense of broader economic well-being. Section 6. National Security, a Convenient Smokescreen. National security concerns are frequently invoked to justify protectionist measures. The argument often goes that certain industries like steel or technology are critical to national defense and must be shielded from foreign competition. This justification, while sometimes legitimate, is often used as a smokescreen to mask protectionist impulses aimed at benefiting specific industries or political constituencies. The recent tariffs on Chinese technology are a case in point. The U.S. government argues that these tariffs are necessary to protect national security, citing concerns about China's growing technological prowess and its potential use in military applications. While these concerns are not entirely unfounded, they are often overblown to justify protectionist measures that primarily benefit U.S. tech companies. The invocation of national security to justify protectionism raises several concerns. It can be used to arbitrarily protect any industry deemed strategically important, regardless of its actual contribution to national defense. This can lead to a proliferation of protectionist measures, distorting markets, and harming the overall economy. The overuse of the national security justification also undermines its legitimacy, making it harder to distinguish genuine security threats from politically motivated protectionism. Section 7. The WTO, a Toothless Watchdog. The World Trade Organization, WTO, established in 1995, was intended to be the guardian of the global trading system. Its mission is to promote free trade, resolve trade disputes, and ensure a level playing field for all member countries. However, the WTO has faced growing criticism for its inability to effectively enforce trade rules and prevent protectionist measures. The WTO's dispute settlement system, once hailed as a cornerstone of the global trading order, has become increasingly ineffective. Countries often ignore WTO rulings, facing minimal consequences for their transgressions. The U.S., despite being a founding member of the WTO, has repeatedly flouted its rules, imposing tariffs and other trade barriers without facing significant repercussions. The WTO's inability to effectively enforce trade rules stems from several factors. Its consensus-based decision-making process makes it difficult to reach agreement on contentious issues. The organization also lacks the power to impose meaningful sanctions on countries that violate trade rules. The rise of protectionism, fueled by nationalist sentiments and strategic rivalries, has further weakened the WTO's authority. The organization, once a symbol of global cooperation on trade, now faces an existential crisis, struggling to maintain its relevance in a world increasingly characterized by protectionism and trade disputes. Section 8. The Global South caught in the crossfire. The escalating trade war between the US and China has significant implications for developing countries, often referred to as the Global South. These countries, many of which rely heavily on trade for their economic growth, are caught in the crossfire of this dispute, facing disruptions to their supply chains, reduced access to markets, and heightened economic uncertainty. The tariffs imposed by the US and China affect not only goods traded directly between them, but also those that pass through their economies as part of global supply chains. Developing countries that supply components or raw materials to these supply chains are particularly vulnerable to the disruptions caused by tariffs. They face reduced demand for their products, leading to job losses and economic hardship. The trade war also creates a climate of uncertainty for developing countries, making it difficult for them to plan for the future and attract foreign investment. The escalating tensions between the US and China also threaten to undermine global cooperation on other issues, such as climate change and development assistance, further harming the interests of the Global South. Section 9. The Price of Hypocrisy, Eroding Trust and Cooperation. The US's hypocritical stance on trade, advocating for free trade while resorting to protectionist measures, carries a significant cost. It undermines the credibility of US leadership on trade, erodes trust among nations, and weakens the foundations of the global trading system. This hypocrisy also fuels resentment and fosters a climate of distrust, making it harder to address global challenges that require cooperation and collective action. The selective application of free trade principles based on political expediency rather than consistent economic logic exposes the US to accusations of double standards. This inconsistency weakens the US's position in trade negotiations, as other countries are less likely to trust its commitments or accept its arguments for open markets. The US's protectionist turn also sets a dangerous precedent, encouraging other countries to follow suit. This could trigger a wave of protectionist measures worldwide, leading to trade wars, fragmented markets, and a decline in global economic growth. The erosion of trust and cooperation, fueled by US hypocrisy on trade, undermines the very system it claims to uphold, jeopardizing the stability and prosperity of the global economy. Section 10. The Future of Trade, Towards a Fairer System. The current trade war and the rise of protectionism signal a need for a fundamental rethinking of the global trading system. The WTO, once seen as the guarantor of free and fair trade, has proven ineffective in preventing protectionist measures and resolving trade disputes. A new system is needed, one that is fairer, more transparent, and better equipped to address the challenges of the 21st century. This new system should prioritize the interests of all countries, not just the most powerful. It should ensure that the benefits of trade are more equitably distributed, reducing inequality and promoting sustainable development. The system should also be more responsive to the concerns of workers and communities, ensuring that trade liberalization does not come at the expense of labor rights or environmental protection. The future of trade depends on our ability to move beyond the hypocrisy and double standards that have characterized the past. We need a system that is based on genuine cooperation, mutual respect, and a commitment to shared prosperity. This will require a willingness to address the legitimate concerns of all countries, including those in the Global South. It will also require a recognition that trade is not an end in itself, but a means to achieve broader social and economic goals. Section 11. Conclusion. The mask of free trade slips. The Biden administration's tariffs on Chinese technology expose the hypocrisy at the heart of US trade policy. They reveal a deep disconnect between the US's rhetoric on free trade and its actual practices. This inconsistency undermines the credibility of US leadership on trade, erodes trust among nations, and threatens the stability of the global trading system. The US, a self-proclaimed champion of free trade, has a long history of resorting to protectionist measures, often with disastrous consequences. This hypocritical stance, while benefiting select domestic industries, harms consumers, distorts markets, and fuels global tensions. It also sets a dangerous precedent, encouraging other countries to adopt protectionist policies, leading to a spiral of trade wars and economic decline. The current trade war and the rise of protectionism signal a need for a fundamental rethinking of the global trading system. We need a fairer, more transparent, and more equitable system that prioritizes the interests of all countries, not just the most powerful. This will require a genuine commitment to cooperation, a willingness to address the legitimate concerns of all nations, and a recognition that trade is a means to an end, not an end in itself. The future of trade, and indeed the future of the global economy, depends on our ability to move beyond hypocrisy and embrace a more just and sustainable approach to international commerce.